So thank you so much to everybody for joining us today from wherever you are across the state. We really appreciate you spending some time with us. So let me just introduce myself and my colleagues here that will be helping me with this webinar. My name is Barbara Suits. I am the Open Educational Resources and Instructional Materials Program Manager here at OSPI. I am joined by Jerry Price, our Rockstar Social Studies Supervisor, and also Zach Murphy is on the line, our Communications Specialist guru and just extraordinaire with all things communications related. So thanks for joining us. I hope you guys are all well. Okay, so I will tell you this right now. I have been experiencing a little bit of trouble with my bandwidth, so I am going to go off of a video here. So just a quick hello to folks. Thanks for joining us, and I'm gonna cut my my video feed, so you're going to see a static image from here on out. So again, everybody, thanks for joining us. Here's the strategy. I'm going to try and keep this webinar really brief. We're going to do a 30-minute introduction. I'm setting my timer now on my phone. So I have two goals with this webinar. First of all, to have you introduced to our Washington Hub on OER Commons and just kind of understand a little bit about the purpose and the organization. And then also show you how to search for, download, and share resources. At the end of our half an hour together, I will invite anyone that would like to go ahead and exit the webinar, knowing that they can come back to a recorded version to catch up on links, and I'll have the slides available as well. But I'm also going to be staying online for another half an hour after that for any questions, and happy to answer any questions related to the hub or our suggestions for continued learning opportunities. So feel free to stick around, and also know that you can bail after half an hour if you would like to.
Hey, and real quick, Barbara, if you have a question, go ahead and put it in the chat, and I'll do my best to read out questions at the end of our time.
Thanks, Jerry. So I've been throwing around OER a bit, and I thought I'd do just a little bit of an acronym check so everybody knows what I'm talking about. Open Educational Resources, or OER, are those instructional materials that fall into one of two camps. Either they're in the public domain already, or they have been released with a license, whereby the copyright holder gives you permission to reuse and oftentimes adapt that material and redistribute it to folks. Think of it this way, open resources are free, but they also have permissions that let you retain and reuse, remix, revise, and redistribute. The 5 R's. So when I'm talking about open resources, it's really those permissions that I am focusing on. By quick way of a little introduction to the project at OSPI that I'm working on, the OER project has been around since 2012, and we're focused in kind of 3 main areas. One is just awareness and outreach, so that folks across the district know what open resources are. The second big bucket of our work is really doing review of open resources, but also working with districts around the state who are either adapting or developing materials to help get those spread on a wider scale. And the last version, and the one that we're really concentrating on today, is just curation of a resource library of open resources that folks across the state and around the world have access to. These resources have been developed by OSPI grantees or collaborators, and they're aligned to Washington State learning standards. So the place where we have decided to host this library or collection of resources is on OER Commons. Some of you might be familiar with OER Commons. This is it's a digital library of openly licensed materials There are a number of these OER repositories out there. OER Commons is one of the ones that tends to focus more on K through 12 than on higher ed content. So it's one that you might be familiar with. If you're not familiar with, hopefully you will be after today. On OER Commons, and we'll jump there in a minute, I put the URL on screen here. It's just OERcommons, one word, .org. On my screen, you'll notice that what you'll see is a search bar up there. So you could just type in the item that you're looking for and perform a quick search. So let me jump to OER Commons on screen. And Jerry and Zach, you can tell me if it's actually showing up on screen or if I need to change anything.
I can see it. It's looking good.
Perfect. Yep. So I'm jumping out to this large repository of openly licensed work. In its very simplest form, you could just type in what you're looking for. Let's say, for instance, I am trying to search for civics resources. Since our social studies expert is on the line, I'm going to type in civics, and I'm actually not going to fill in anything else just yet. I'm just going to search for civics. And at that point, 169 results will show up. If I want to, I can filter things with a little bit more granularity. So for instance, I could look at education level, and I could focus maybe on high school civics if I wanted to. And that number of resources that's out there has dropped down to 87. So this is just kind of the large pool of resources that's available on OER Commons. There are currently, I think, about 150,000 resources that are housed on this site. I'm going to jump back to my PowerPoint for just a second. When you do start to dive into the resources on that site, what you'll notice is that each resource has kind of a card catalog entry that tells you a little bit about the material. It gives you a brief description of the resource. Most importantly, it gives you an idea of who the contributor of this resource is. So you'll have a little bit of information about the provider, whether it's coming from an organization or a university or an individual contributor. You also get a little bit of information about the license that's associated with it. So that's going to give you a clue as to what level of permitted use you have with the materials. Oftentimes, you'll notice that the resource has been aligned to standards. So in this example resource card here, this particular resource has been aligned to the Common Core English Language Arts standards, which are, of course, our Washington State Learning Standards for ELA. Within the larger pool of resources on OER Commons, Washington has kind of carved out a little island. We have our own hub. It's called the Washington Hub on OER Commons. In the days and weeks to come, I might be requesting maybe some help on renaming that, because that's an awkward mouthful to say. The goal of the Washington Hub on OER Commons is specifically to highlight those resources that have been developed by Washington educators and collaborators to be aligned with our Washington State Learning Standards. And our goal really is to provide equity of access to quality instructional materials, no matter what zip code you happen to live in. I'm going to jump to the Washington Hub. So you can get there in a number of ways. The easiest for our purposes today is just to type in, if you're following along, OER Commons, one word, .org/hubs/Washington. And you'll arrive at our little home within the larger OER Commons universe. A couple of things that I wanted to point out here. The first thing is that our Washington Hub is divided up in a couple of different larger sections. The first on the landing page is our OSPI content area section. In each of these groups, you're going to find resources that has been either co-developed or curated by our Washington experts in that particular content area. I'm going to dive into social studies since Jerry Price happens to be on the line. And I'll say that social studies is probably one of our more robust group areas. We've done a lot of work in this area, so you're going to find a lot of resources that hopefully you'll find very useful. Once you dive into the group, you'll notice that on the left-hand side, we've broken it out into different folders. So if you're interested specifically in finding, let's say, something for our elementary level in social studies, you can click on that tab and you'll see that it filters just by that particular grade group. If you are interested in taking a look across all grades, you could certainly do that as well, and you'll find resources like the Since Time Immemorial Tribal Sovereignty Curriculum, which is appropriate for all grades. That's called out there as well. I'm going to dive into one particular resource since it's topical right now. This is the Elections and Voting Teacher Resources item. Once you dive in, you'll notice that what we saw on the PowerPoint slide earlier, you'll see the description slide. But if you click on View Resource, you can actually go into the resource itself, and you'll notice you have a couple of options. You can certainly look at the resource online. In this particular case, it has some embedded video. It also has downloadable documents that have been created in partnership with the Washington Secretary of State's office. You'll find some links to external videos that you can either view online on the platform, or you could go out to, in this case, YouTube and Crash Course and see them there as well. And we've also linked some pertinent classroom materials. So each of those links will take you to additional information. The nice thing about this platform is, in addition to viewing it online, it's also going to allow you to download it in multiple formats. So if you look in the right-hand corner, you'll notice a big blue download button. Click on that and you could download this as a PDF, which could then be distributed to folks. It could also be downloaded as an EPUB, which is certainly going to help if you have students with accessibility issues. That EPUB format is very friendly and able to be increased in font or changed in background color, so folks will have a little bit more access to the resources as well. Let me back up and go back to our oops. Apologies, I backed up a little bit too far. There's certainly other content areas you might want to take a look at. For instance, our Washington Mathematics group. I know that they have been diligently adding resources over these last few days, specifically in the grade 9 through 12 category. I know that they've been adding a lot of exponential tasks. So each of these has just become available. The nice part about a lot of these resources is that you do have the ability to also remix them and adapt them so that they're going to be appropriate for your particular classroom setting or online setting, as the case may be. In this case right here, if I was interested in taking this particular task on cell decay and mathematics, I could click the Remix button. And what I would do is really create a new instance of this particular activity. I could take the content that was already there, and I could change it to meet the needs of my students. I could change the image, I could add resources, I could add video, I could add some annotation in terms of instructional notes if I wanted to do that as well. Or I could upload a resource like a Word document or a PDF that might go along with this particular activity. Know that if you do use that remix option, you are creating a copy. So you're not editing the original author's work, you're just creating a new version for yourself. Going back to our Washington landing page here, you'll notice that there are a couple of other groups as well. The first area is curated by OSPI content experts. The second area is called OSPI grantees and collaborators. Here you're going to find work from our Washington grantees. OSPI is the pass-through agency for a lot of funds that come from the legislature. One of the requirements of receiving funding from OSPI, if you're creating instructional materials, is that they need to be openly licensed and they need to be accessible on our Washington Hub. So for instance, the Climb Time group right here, 16 Washington non-government organizations and school districts have received funding to produce instructional materials related to climate science. And as a result, the work that they are working on and creating as instructional materials is all available on the Washington Hub for everyone to access. And in this particular case, you're going to see the same grade band breakdown that you saw earlier, but you've got a couple of new categories as well. One of them is community science. So we have a lot of informal science educators that have also been creating resources for folks to access and remix. Oops, let me go back. Other grantee groups that you might be interested in are the digital citizenship media literacy grants. We have folks that are working on those right now, so I know that there's some content that's starting to be added to that group. We also have Seattle Public Schools has been doing a lot of work with taking some of the social studies units that have been created and translating them into other languages. For instance, the state we're in, Washington, is a work that was contributed by the League of Women Voters. Seattle Public Schools received a grant to translate that into Chinese, Japanese, and they're working on a Spanish translation of this work as well. It is openly licensed, so you can take a look at that content. You can either view it online or you can also download that particular content. So I am not going to jump through all the different resources that are available, but I did want to give you a little bit of a flavor of some of the work that you'll be able to find. The last category are links to Washington schools and districts that are doing work in this area. I know that there are other schools that are doing work related to OER. This is just a small subset. As more come online, we'll be happy to add those to the hub as well. These groups are not curated by OSPI. These groups are curated by the individual districts that are doing the work. But we certainly have some standouts that have been doing some pretty phenomenal stuff. Puyallup School District has created a civics course with a Washington State history component that you can find. Highline Public Schools has been doing some fantastic work with our early learners, and they're providing some word study guides for kindergarten through second grade, and all of that work is available on here as well. If you don't happen to know what particular category to look for the particular resource you might be interested in, you can certainly do a global search under Search Hub resources. So if I look again for civics here, I'm not going to look through the entire pool of OER Commons and get my 169 results. I'm only going to look in the smaller pool of resources that's in our Washington OER Hub. And so this is work that has been created, again, by OSPI grantees, collaborators. staff or Washington districts. So you're going to find a much smaller group of resources. Sorry, I'm taking a quick look at my my watch to see how I'm doing with time. Got a few more minutes left. There's one more important area that I wanted to talk about, and this is one that we have just added to the hub. This work that you see on the screen now, this has been going on for the past 5 years. We've been adding materials to this, this part. So this is not new work. This section right here, however, is new work, and it's really in response to the current situation that we find ourselves in. We wanted to expand our sandbox a little bit, and instead of only focusing on homegrown Washington resources to share with our stakeholders, we wanted to also link out to some external third-party sites where we know that there's good quality content. In some cases, it might not be an open resource. It might be a resource that is free to access online. Doesn't mean it's not a good resource, it just means you can't actually take it and adapt it. That's not the case with all of these resources, but it will be for some. We've started to curate materials and include them in these kind of big bucket topic areas. So for instance, if you have questions about what are some good resources for supporting our youngest learners, certainly click on that category, and what you'll find here is a small subset of resources that might be particularly useful when you're dealing with our youngest learners. You could certainly take a look at the early learning family resource suggestions. What we have listed here are some websites. We link to the National Association for the Education of Young Children. They've got some great message and a backpack resources that might be good to share with your students' parents. We also link to PBS Kids for Parents. There are some suggestions for apps that you might be interested in. And there are also some suggestions for online storytime events and links to those read-alouds that are happening throughout the country and throughout the state. Back up a little bit here. Instead of just large selections of resources that have been curated, we might also in this area just link out to individual sites directly. Since we're still in that early learning category, Storytime Online is one that our content experts have found to be particularly useful. You'll notice that now we're actually leaving the OER Commons website and we're linking out to an external site. This Storytime Online site happens to be sponsored by the Screen Actors Guild, and you can have read-alouds. So in this case, you might have you know, a famous actor reading a story that you can share with your students. I'm going to back up one more time, and I want to direct you to one more resource that hopefully you will find useful. You'll notice that in this remote learning suggestions section, one resource that you will find in common in all of those different bucket areas is a document called OSPI Remote Learning Resource Suggestions. In this particular resource, we have asked our content area specialists across the agency, in addition to our departments of bilingual and English learners, our special education and professional development folks, to kind of give us a go-to list of their top 10 resources that might be helpful in a remote learning environment. We have this document available in a couple of different formats. One, it is available on our OSPI website under the COVID-19 section. This is available online directly on the site, but it's also available on our Washington Hub on OER Commons. You can download it in a number of different formats. You can view it online or as a PDF, and you'll notice that what happens here is that you get just a quick single page overview of those top resources with links to the appropriate place, and also an indication of what grade level it's appropriate for, and if it's best for an educator, for a family member, or a student working independently. You'll also find that it is downloadable as an Excel spreadsheet. So if you are interested in adapting or adding your own resources or sorting it in some way that makes a little bit more sense than a static PDF file, you certainly have the ability to do that as well. All right, so with that, and I know that that was a fire hose of information, but again, know that the intent was just to introduce you to the fact that this resource is out there and available. Oops, I'm gonna zip through this. These were my backup slides in case for some reason my connection to the internet failed me. I have put contact information on here. Please feel free to contact OSPI through any of these channels. My direct email is there. The Washington OSPI Twitter is there. Our website is also available. And I also want to link to the OSPI website as well, which is where you're going to be able to find the most current information on the COVID situation as it relates to our Washington school districts. I know that Zach wants me to remind everybody to please subscribe to our OSPI YouTube channel. There is content that is being developed there consistently and put up frequently. I'm going to open it up to Zach and Jerry if they have any last words that that they want to say before we let folks go and open this up for the question and answer session.
Thank you, Barbara. I think, yeah, just to reiterate, we're going to be posting a lot of stuff on our YouTube channel, so please subscribe and kind of keep an eye on that. I don't know if, Jerry, do you have anything to add at this point?
Jerry's just being quiet at the moment. You know, my phone has been pinging, so I might be he might be trying to contact me that way. I'll take a closer look. But we do want to release, folks. I do appreciate you joining us for this quick 30-minute introduction. I hope this is just the beginning of conversations about this resource, but I do want to let you know it's all there. I am going to stick around, so if we have folks that would like to ask any questions, please feel free to hang around. Other than that, I wish everybody the best. Please stay well, and hope to hear from you soon. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
You got booted off there for a while, Barbara.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jerry.
Okay.
You were that was probably you that was on my phone pinging.
It was.
I don't know why you got booted out.
I don't know either. Did you get the questions about CTE?
I did not get the questions about CTE, probably because I don't have my chat window up. So let's
quite a few questions about whether there's a CTE tab or how to access CTE materials.
Yes. So let me do a couple things. Let's go back to that one.
So Barbara, this is Samantha.
Hey, Samantha.
Hey, I sent the link in the chat to the CTE topic.
Thank you.
Where the confusion is that Michelle Faxey has a hub on that first view, and CTE does not. So we've been getting a lot of stressful messages over the last 24 hours about why, like, people are confused about the two different places for depositing information. And when I talked to Michelle about it, she said hers isn't, I think she has maybe 5 contributors and not a fully expanded site. You know, she started it a long time ago with you, maybe back in October, because she's a fabulous early adopter. So one of the things that I sent you a message during the Zoom is we need to get together and see how to balance out what we've got posted. And that's on us because you did ask us to do that. And we are up to our eyebrows in everything else we're providing to our field. You know that.
Absolutely.
So we'll get together, Jerry. I feel like between Tim and the other teachers that inquired, I scheduled an offsite meeting, or an offsite, that sounds horrible, an offline meeting with Tim Canoe about the professional orgs and how they can contribute and kind of some of those comments in there. So we will take those, Barbara, and know that I need to get with you for a deeper dive into blowing out our area. This was awesome. I really appreciate it.
We can certainly do that. And so I'm happy to add more resources here, Sam, but I'm also happy to, if we want to create a new group on here,
Sure.
which is CTE, let's definitely do that. And that's
Yeah.
another home where we can start to link to some of the great resources that you guys have.
Yeah, and I just, I would like to lean on your advice about whether we should do a CTE wheel or whether we should just let each program area do a hub similar to what the other LNT program areas have done. So you can think through that and tell me what's the best way to approach that. So
absolutely, we can talk about that.
Our team's excited, you know, 7 months later, we're excited to get moving on this. So thank you, this was awesome.
Thanks.
Hey, Barbara, this doesn't apply to Washington, but I have a couple of people who are from out of state who are supervisors wondering if there's a cost associated with establishing an OER hub.
So there is a cost that's associated with establishing a hub. They do have different tiers. I will say that they are extremely reasonable. If you go under the main OER Commons site to our services, there's a little bit of information on OER Commons hubs. And they also have microsites that are available, but they have pricing information on things like that. That is for the hub itself. If you would like to just on your own create a group, you certainly have the option to do that. So, and that's free and there's no cost. So if you don't need a big, you know, umbrella hub, you could just create, you know, your own district group and certainly add that to the Commons, and there's no cost associated with that at all. I do want to mention that registration is required if you would like to do things like create a group or if you would like to upload resources. You do not need to register if you just want to search for materials and download and do all of that work as well. And registration consists of basically providing your name and email. So it's not a high bar to register for that. So that's that. Any other questions coming in, Jerry, that we should address?
There were a couple. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Barbara. We just wanted to say hello. It's Tracy and Janine. We're
together
again.
So good to see you, Tracy. Yeah. Tracy and Janine have been doing just amazing work with OER, first at Puyallup and now with Chief Leshy Schools. So thank you guys for being on and thank you for all the work that you've contributed. This is fantastic to see you.
Thank you for your leadership, Barbara. Yeah, we wouldn't miss this for the world. Thank you.
Thanks, you guys.
Aw. There were some questions and my chat box crashed when my site crashed, but they were regarding consumer sciences and those sorts of courses and whether we had anything to fill that.
So we do have one. We do have a group that's Washington Family and Consumer Science. And there has been some initial work that's been done here. They have contributed one resource on here that you might want to take a look at. This is a selection of Washington ACTE, Association of Career and Technical Educators. They've provided some guidance and resources on there. And I know that it sounds like I will be connecting with our CTE folks to see if we can kind of beef up the links to resources in this area. So that is definitely something that we've heard loud and clear, and we'll work to make that a priority to get more info out to you folks.
Great. So a lot of people are still on. If you want to just unmute yourself and ask a question, you're welcome to.
Jerry, Tim Canoe, Barb, thank you from Washington Association for Career and Technical Education and all of the CTE questions. We've been working on much of this on our own in a different sphere and would love to be involved in helping to curate and collate this stuff in a Washington State site so that it does more formally and can be assured that it supports the Washington State frameworks for CTE. So with
That's
that,
awesome.
look forward to doing much more of that. And each of our subsections around the content areas would be excited about that as we go forward.
Oh, thrilled to hear that. So yeah, I look forward to just chatting with you offline via email, and we can certainly meet and talk about this more.
Thanks.
So I have a question about the Washington State stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, because, you know, that's like a graduation requirement, and in our district, we're doing it in 7th grade.
Yep.
Do you think that there's enough stuff to like pull off of this site to be able to put something together?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm just over a year out of the classroom, and I did completely online, a lot of it OER for quite a few years, including my district that I was in went to a full year of Washington State with one semester that was dedicated to tribal history.
Wow.
Where we used the Since Time Immemorial work, as well as Native Knowledge 360, which is through the National Museum of the American Indian.
Yes, I'm familiar with that site.
Yeah, it's a great one, if I do say so myself. but yeah, and then we did a semester of sort of traditional Washington State history, and there was, especially with the League of Women